were the worst sort of vandal, acting without care of cost or harm to those they affected.
Is he a hacking mastermind? Police officials tell CNN they're trying to determine if the teenager is connected to any potential hacking group.
Picture this. The year is 2011 and you are on Twitter. A new tweet pops up. It is from the sinister hacking group, Anonymous.
Citizens of the world, we are Anonymous.
Anonymous is one of the biggest online vigilante groups. Members hack into companies and governments. You've seen them wearing masks in protest.
The tweet is straight to the point. It announces that it has just shut down another website. And of course, they ask their followers which site they want to see taken down next. Now, who would you imagine is behind a group like this? A badass hacker in a black hoodie hunched over a computer? I bet you'd never imagine that it would be this guy. Hector Xavier Monsegur, or, as others call him, Sabu. Do not be deceived by the wide smile and nerdy glasses. This guy in 2011 was more dangerous than 40 hackers in one room. In 2011, he was known to be an active member of a hacking collective known as LulzSec, and these guys broke into government agencies and major corporations for fun. But it wasn't just about fun for Sabu. It was about making a statement against authority. However, less than 13 years down the line, and Sabu, one of the most dangerous hackers in the world, now works for the FBI.
How did you learn about hacking?
We were poor, so I needed to find a way that would be cheap or free so that I could be able to access the internet without being a burden to my grandmother.
Hold up. How the hell did that happen? Well, let's back up a little bit. Sabu was born as Hector Xavier Monsegur in New York in 1983 and was raised in the Lower East Side neighborhood of Manhattan. While this wasn't the greatest neighborhood to raise kids in the early 80s, it still turned out to be the right place for Sabu. As a teenager, he became interested in computers and soon became obsessed with them. But rather than pump all of his energy into building a supercomputer or digital product, he focused on the back door, hacking. In his late teens, he had mastered hacking so well that he became popular in several hacking communities. So, in the early 2000s, when he was just slightly over 18, a group called Anonymous reached out to him, and he soon became involved with them. But here was the thing with Sabu. He enjoyed working alone, so this kind of delayed his decision to fully join the group, and later in his life he would describe Anonymous as a loose collective of activists, hacktivists, and hackers who are united by their hatred of authority and their desire for freedom of expression. Interestingly, this was a core part of Sabu's life. His entire life, he had hated the authority, and he was determined to do all he could to undermine the government's authority. Still involved with Anonymous, Sabu formed a community for local programmers in 2002, a program which trained young hackers and helped established programmers become even better. But the temptation from Anonymous was stronger than Sabu's conviction, and the more he hung around with those guys, the stronger his anti-government beliefs became.
None of these targets were particularly difficult to hack.
Any method of disruption at any cost, any means necessary.
I was arrested when I was 16 years old.
Police broke down the front door, handcuffed me in my bed.
But it would be unfair to Anonymous to 100% state that they turned Sabu into a hacker who hated authority. In fact, Sabu's love for hacking and activism became one when he discovered what the US Navy did at Vieques Island. Did you know that from 1940 till 2003, the US Navy used that small, beautiful island for target practice? For years, the government threw bombs and grenades into the sea, destroying aquatic life and the island itself, all in the name of training. If you lived on this island at that time, every day would seem like a war zone. So, we can understand why a young Sabu would be pissed enough to hate the government. But the final straw eventually came in 2010, when an arrest warrant was put out for Julian Assange, the hacker who is just as popular as a rock star. In the underground world of hacking, Julian was a superstar before any of us heard of him. Known to be the brains behind WikiLeaks, Julian became famous when he published thousands of sensitive US diplomatic cables that had gone through a former US soldier called Chelsea Manning.
Free, free, free Assange! Free, free, free Assange!
Since 2010, we've warned that Julian Assange would face prosecution and extradition to the United States for his publishing activities for WikiLeaks.
Julian's arrest opened a can of worms for hackers, but Sabu wasn't having it. To him, This was the government's attempt to silence guys like him, and he wasn't going to take it like a lying dog. Finally, in 2010, Sabu pledged his full allegiance to Anonymous, and soon became the most beloved member of the team. The next year, he already had enough influence to become the next leader of the group, and he did, transforming Anonymous into a scarier and more powerful entity. He wasn't afraid to speak out, and he was soon known as the charismatic hacker, always ready to speak with the media or share updates. It was also during Sabu's leadership that Anonymous began to share their victories on X. After taking down a government website, or that of a huge corporation, the group announces on X. But Sabu understood something about being an effective leader. If you want absolute power, you must have a smaller group who will be absolutely loyal to you. The Russians had the KGB, the North Koreans had the Supreme Guard Command, and Sabu had LulzSec. LulzSec was a smaller arm within Anonymous, and the group included a small number of very good hackers. As soon as these hackers came together, it was bad news for the government because they instantly launched a series of high-profile attacks. But just like Anonymous, there wasn't any defined structure in LulzSec. In fact, the name was a representation that all their attacks were meant for laughs, almost like LOL. They weren't also interested in making money off their attacks, and there was no formal hierarchy in the group. Even though Sabu was the established boss, he didn't bark orders around. Instead, Sabu and his hacktivists used online chat rooms and secret forums to have discussions and agreements.
We are Anonymous. We are Legion.
As Anonymous grew, Monsegur helped take the movement to a worldwide level. At the height of the Arab Spring in Tunisia, he hijacked the Prime Minister's website, posting this letter in support of protesters.
For their first attack, Sabu and LulzSec picked Fox.com as their first victim. The unfortunate company didn't do much to incur the wrath of LulzSec, but it happened that they referred to Common, an American rapper, as vile on live TV. One of the members of LulzSec must be an avid hip-hop fan, as this was the reason why they hit the site. Pretty petty if you ask me. As soon as the hackers got on the site, they instantly discovered a certain weakness on the website, and by exploiting this system, they were able to leak the names and profiles of 73,000 X Factor contestants in the US.
Or finally, I was able to do something that contributed to society, regardless if I was at home in the Lower East Side, in the projects.
After successfully doing that, the group posted on Pastabin, saying, "We don't like you very much. As such, we cordially invite you to kiss our handcrafted crescent fresh asses." But while this was a successful debut for LulzSec, it wasn't entirely great for Anonymous. While their audience had been previously impressed with their antics, more people were beginning to have different thoughts. Anonymous had done a good job of exposing bad companies, but half the time, innocent citizens were the ones who truly suffered. Not only does their personal information and profiles get leaked, nobody bats an eye or tries to protect their data. And it got even worse. Barely 2 weeks after their first attack, the group released the transaction logs of over 3,000 ATMs in the UK. With these attacks, LulzSec slowly lost the backing of the public. But despite what people thought about them, Sabu and LulzSec weren't about to pack it home. Later, the group decided to play a huge prank on the entire world as their second attack. The hackers gained access into PBS and planted a story that said Tupac and the Notorious Big were alive and well, both living in New Zealand. Even though this was hard to believe, people couldn't get past the fact that PBS released the story. Not only are they super reliable, it also suggested that PBS knew something that the rest of us didn't. Now imagine the heartbreak of millions of fans and the family members of these rappers when they discovered that this was an elaborate prank played by Sabu and his team. The PBS hit was a hard pill for fans to swallow, but the group was still not ready to stop. Their next target? Sony's PlayStation Network. A few months earlier, George Hotz, another hacker, was in hot water for jailbreaking the PlayStation 3. And while he had done it previously with other products, Sony decided to take legal action against him by suing him. As you already figured, Sabu and his team of hackers at LulzSec didn't like the sound of this, so they decided to hit the company's website. Gaining access into the website and database of Sony was simple, but what they did at this point couldn't be considered as a prank. The group stole the private data of 24.6 million customers, making it into one of the largest data breaches till date. But there was something quite fascinating about this incident. LulzSec claimed that these attacks affected millions of Sony's users, but the company argued that they were able to breach the data of only 3,500 customers. Even though this seems like a tiny number compared to 24.6 million, it didn't reduce the impact of the damage. The names, passwords, emails, home addresses of these people were taken, and they were eventually used in several scams around the world. Unknown to the group at the time, this attack on Sony had put them on the radar of several government authorities, including the FBI. But things further took a turn for the worse when Sabu encouraged members of the group to attack a site affiliated with the FBI. If these hackers never had a track record of being really destructive, perhaps the FBI could have let them go with a slap on the wrist. But this wasn't the first time the group was launching a cyber attack, but the first time they'd attack a government site affiliated with the FBI. And if you know anything about the FBI, then you know they aren't exactly great with forgiveness. As soon as LulzSec hit a government site, Sabu increased the stakes and put everyone in his team under the radar of the government, and the hacker knew this. On the night of the attack, he told the rest of the group in their chat forum, "You realize we smacked the FBI today. This means everyone in here must remain extremely secure." The name of the government site was InfraGard, and LulzSec leaked the names and emails of some of its members.
InfraGard is an alliance of volunteers from the government and private sectors who want to make sure the country's infrastructure is secure.
Before finally posting this message, it has come to our unfortunate attention that NATO and our good friend Barack Obama, 24th century Obama, LulzSec, have recently upped the stakes with regard to hacking. They now treat hacking as an act of war. So, we just hacked an FBI-affiliated website, InfraGard, specifically the Atlanta chapter, and leaked its user base. We also took complete control over the site and defaced it. However, just so I wouldn't be called the party pooper, I gotta admit that LulzSec was truly fun at some point. When there were rumors that the group had hacked Nintendo, Sabu and LulzSec quickly declared, "We are not targeting Nintendo. We like the N64 too much. We sincerely hope Nintendo plugs the gap." They then hacked into Bethesda Game Studios, but they really didn't do anything malicious. After gaining access, the group posted on Twitter saying, "Bethesda, we broke into your site over 2 months ago. We've had all of your Brink users for weeks. Please fix your junk. Thanks." Hold up. How come nobody talked about the fact that Bethesda had no idea they had been hacked for 2 months? But if Sabu and LulzSec really wanted to become influential, they needed to have the public on their side. And what better way to do that than handing out freebies? Introducing the Titanic Takedown Tuesday, the group focused on taking down any website or corporation that their fans wanted. At some point, it was Minecraft, then the League of Legends, The Escapist, and eventually an IT security company called Finfisher. In the same month, Sabu decided to do something a little more interesting. With his group, he released 62,000 emails and passwords to Mediafire. Now, he didn't say which websites you could sign in with these emails, and this made people try several websites before they could use the emails. Some mischievous ones got access to Facebook accounts and instantly uploaded tons of pornographic content to the accounts. Those who were lucky to gain access to Amazon bought a ton of books and some other useless items. So if you ever had a weird purchase on your Amazon from 2011, who knows, you just might have been a victim. But LulzSec wasn't just working around the clock to make people laugh. The team were also in contact with some really powerful hackers. And Hector Xavier Monsegur, or of course Sabu, was right at the head of it. The representative for WikiLeaks, Sigurdur Thordarson, reached out to Sabu and his group. Sigurdur didn't exactly want them to join WikiLeaks, He just needed their help. And for them to do that, they had to join an IRC server. While on the server, Sigurdur broke down the terms of the new partnership. He wanted LulzSec to infiltrate some very important Icelandic government and corporate websites. By doing this, LulzSec would expose a corrupt government and corporate organizations, and also show that the government was illegally investigating WikiLeaks. But, Sigurdur warned, this could lead to a serious uprising in Iceland. Sabu thought it was a mission he and this team could complete, but he just needed to be sure that he was, in fact, talking with Julian Assange and Sigurdur, and when he finally got the proof he needed, he gave his team the go-ahead to start the project. Unfortunately, this wasn't the typical easy mission that the group expected. At first, they just couldn't get past the firewalls on the Icelandic government servers. Then Sigurdur successfully managed to get his hands on some very sensitive government data, but nobody, including several experts at MIT, could decrypt the data. Similarly, the group hit a brick wall, and that project pretty much disappeared like a midnight ghost. But this wasn't the final conversation between Julian Assange, Sigurdur Thordarson, and Sabu. The guys from WikiLeaks knew that Sabu was immensely talented, so why not have him working for them? If this ever happened, it would mean two supervillains had joined forces, and perhaps they would have completely evaded arrest. Julian and Sigurdur weren't the only hackers who were interested in the talent and skill of Sabu. He also attracted the attention of a famous hacker, the Jester. But there was a fundamental difference between these two hackers, and they argued about pretty much everything, almost like a toxic couple. But mention the Westboro Baptist Church, and these two men would become the best of friends, just so they could bring down this church. For some weird reason nobody fully understands, both hackers hated the church with such ferocity, and it was the only thing they could agree on. Then, they both attended DEF CON 19, but Sabu refused to meet in person with the Jester because he was worried this will put him under the radar of the authorities. At this point, there's an interesting thing that you have to know. While all of these happened, nobody knew the true identity of Sabu. To the entire world, he was just a voice behind a screen, a hacker who had no iota of human feeling left in him. So, in March 2011, a rival hacker group, Backtrace Security, published Namshub, a PDF publication that sought to expose the evil deeds of hacktivists like Sabu. In this location, Sabu's real name, Hector Monsegur, was published, and the world finally saw the man behind the screen. That was definitely bad for Hector Monsegur, right? Well, wait until you hear who was behind Backtrace Security. In an interesting twist, Backtrace Security was made up of hackers who left anonymous because they got tired of how things were handled. One of the members of the group had this to say: "One cannot fight for justice and democracy by using unjust, anti-democratic tactics." And for Hector, he was just really unlucky. Backtrace found his identity after he mistakenly linked his personal website. And with the help of Backtrace, the FBI finally had a name and face for a man who was once the world's most wanted cybercriminal. Without knowing, Hector was now under the radar of the FBI, and they knew everything about his daily activities. If he does something as simple as turning his computer on, there's a chance one agent probably knows about it. This way, they were able to trace his activities until they were sure it was the right time. And the right time finally came in June 2011, when Hector made a similar mistake. He logged into a chat room and forgot to mask his IP address, and before he realized his mistake, the FBI were knocking on the door of his apartment in New York. It was over, and Hector was taken to jail.
When did you know the FBI was onto you?
Several days before, probably several days, a couple weeks before my arrest, because I would come downstairs.
Hector's catalog of crimes was long enough to send him to jail for 124 years. And considering how long he had launched and spearheaded cyber attacks, the FBI wanted to send him off to jail as quickly as possible. But they also knew that Hector was just one of many, and he could be used as a secret agent to catch some other players in the game. Not wanting to go to jail for that long, Hector took the deal with the government and began to work as an FBI informant. Nobody else knew about this. Not his friends, not his family, and most especially not his colleagues at Anonymous or LulzSec. The FBI released him under strict conditions, one of which being that he had to work 8 16-hour each day, and of course act as if nothing was wrong. And for every hour he worked, he was monitored by several agents. Hector's life became a living hell because he was lying to his friends and working for the government he had been very vocal against. As expected, Hector's partnership with the FBI was a match made in heaven. The FBI was able to stop several cyber attacks before it even happened, and over 300 government and corporate attacks were stopped. The members of LulzSec might have suspected that someone was feeding info to the feds, but how exactly do you find that out when everyone is anonymous? So, Hector remained working with the FBI for several months, gathering intel and helping the government build strong cases against notorious hackers. And the FBI got all of that without raising a single sign of suspicion in Anonymous or LulzSec. Eventually, the FBI started to arrest suspected hackers who were primarily members of LulzSec and Anonymous. These tips from Hector were so good that the FBI arrested these individuals in their homes, complete with their full names and pictures for identification. But that wasn't the only job Hector was doing for the FBI. He was pretty good with computers, so wouldn't it be a good idea if he also took care of vulnerabilities in the FBI system? Now, Hector had 2 new jobs he could add to his CV: FBI informant and FBI IT expert. But being an insider sucked for a man of principle like Hector, and even though he continued to hack with the backing of the FBI, just so he could expose his friends, he became a different man. In an insane, ironic twist, when Hector made this tweet, he was probably holed up in a government office while he urged people to fight back against authority. Eventually, in March 2012, the cat was let out of the bag, and Hector was publicly pronounced as an informant for the FBI. But before his friends could react to him being a snitch, they were picked up and arrested by the government. Several individuals were arrested in the UK and US, most of them tied to Anonymous and LulzSec. The hacking community turned on its own head. How could one of its most prominent members be an informant for the FBI? That was like a made guy in the mafia turning into a police informant. But what made this even more hurtful was the fact that Hector wasn't just a hacker, but a hacker who once truly believed in online activism. However, if you are familiar with how social media works, then you already know that not everyone thought Hector was the bad guy. As a matter of fact, several people thought he did the smart thing by turning his back on illegal cyber activities. Some even said it was atonement for all the bad things he had done in cyberspace. But for Hector, it was deeper than all of that. When he finally granted interviews to explain his part of the story, the former hacker said that he was facing a sentence that was too long. And not only would he hate going away for that long, he also couldn't stand the fact that he was going to be away from his family. Interestingly, he had also grown remorseful of all the terrible cyber attacks he led during the years, further adding that he now wants to live in a world where cyber attacks never happens. At the end of the day, Hector Monsegur spent just 7 months behind bars, and after his cooperation with the FBI, he was finally free to go home. But this release will be under close supervision for 1 year. And on the 27th of May 2014, Hector walked back home to meet his family. It wasn't an exceptionally great deal, but Hector was willing to take anything that came his way. The conditions of his release also meant that he was prohibited from using a computer of any kind, and if he needed to quickly use Google, he had to tell someone to help him. He couldn't work as an IT specialist, so he had to make do with working for his family's tow truck business in Queens, New York. After working there for 3 years and being of good behavior, the FBI finally gave him a chance to use a computer again. He went out and began to look for a job, but you'd be surprised at how many employers aren't willing to work with a former hacker. It was either they thought he was too risky to have around, or they just saw him as an ex-con. Left with no options, he began to take part in bug bounty programs usually organized by companies like Yahoo and United Airlines. Finding these bugs for these companies turned out to be really easy for the former hacker. No surprises there, of course. A guy like Hector is too good to be left unemployed. He eventually found work with Rhino Security Labs, a company based in Seattle, and worked with them for 3 years as the lead penetration tester. Today, Hector wants to be seen as a man who takes care of his family, pays his bills and taxes, and lives according to the law. He doesn't want to be seen as an ex-member of Anonymous or LulzSec, or as the rat who worked with the FBI. Do you think Hector is a different person like he has assured the world? Or do you think he is still Sabu, the hacker on some top-secret hacking project? Well, tell us in the comments section. I'm pretty sure you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed creating it, so hitting the subscribe button doesn't sound like a bad idea, right? Stick around, our next video is just around the corner.